I was hit by a car and injured my head. The doctor said I might suffer from amnesia. Jokingly, I asked the girl sitting by my bedside who she was. She paused and said we were just friends. I looked at Gabriela, who sat beside my bed, and said ordinary. Friends, with a cold, distant look, as if she wasn't joking. The word gotcha got stuck in my throat, and I could only watch her silently. I thought that if the doctor hadn't called her, she probably wouldn't have come to the hospital. But I didn't ask her about it. Instead, I hesitated for a moment, and then forced a casual smile. Is that so? That's really kind of you, I said. She replied with a cold as if I was wasting her time. She looked down, turned on her phone, glanced at the screen, and said, Now that you're awake, I'll head out. I've got work to do. Before I could say anything, she stood up, ready to leave. As she reached the door and opened it, maybe, driven by a small sense of conscience, she turned around and told me, Rest well. The smile on my face faded as soon as she closed the door behind her, leaving me expressionless. No one knew Gabriela and I were in a relationship. We were college sweethearts, and after graduation, we moved south together and joined the top marketing firm in South City. We were young then, but we knew office romances were frowned upon, so we agreed not to tell anyone. 4 years later, both got promoted to business managers, each leading separate teams that were in direct competition. At that point, there was even more reason to keep our relationship secret, so we kept it hidden. I had hesitated and asked her if we should make it public, since there was no official rule against it, but she always brushed it off absent-mindedly. I wasn't even sure if we were still a couple, but today, I got my answer. The doctor told Gabriela I might have temporary memory loss, but assured her I'd recover soon. Even in such a confusing situation, she still said we were just friends. She probably wasn't afraid of being questioned if I remembered. She didn't seem to care whether I was truly amnesiac or just joking. Maybe she wanted to break up a long time ago. Because if we hadn't broken up, how could she openly pursue Diego? Man's intuition is often sharper than radar. In fact, the feelings between Gabriela and me had cooled off long before. We'd been together for so long, from our sophomore year in college to now, 7 years in total. We knew each other as well as the lines on our palms, so any change in her behavior wouldn't escape my notice. It probably started when a new intern joined her department. His name was Diego, tall, handsome, and his last name was Lee. The HR manager once gossiped to me that on his application, under the father's name section, he had written Pablo Lee, the owner of our company, a wealthy second-generation heir. Running his family's business at first, Gabriela explained her extra care towards Diego like this: It wouldn't be wise to offend him. He's just a childish guy, not my type at all. You're overthinking it. I silently accepted her explanation. Later, I wasn't sure if she didn't take me seriously or just didn't bother hiding anything anymore. Within 2 weeks of Diego's arrival, I logged into her long-unused music account, intending to find some background music. That's when I discovered she and Diego were following each other, something I found strange. Since she hadn't listened to music in years because of her busy schedule, this account was one we used in college back when we listened to music together, accumulating almost 9,000 hours of shared listening time. She had even made a playlist named after me, filled with love songs that reminded her of me, songs by my favorite artists, tracks I had shared on social media, and songs she listened to during our long-distance times over winter and summer breaks. When I checked, I saw she had deleted that playlist. Instead, her recent listening history was full of Korean pop songs, something she wouldn't usually be into, but that Diego often listened to. Since we work in marketing, I convinced myself she was just trying to stay current with what young people liked. Maybe I was overthinking things, so quietly I logged out of her account without saying a word, not one to make a fuss without solid proof. After all, the person who stays silent and calm until the end is usually the one with the fewest words and the most composed face. Of course, her coincidences with Diego didn't stop there. In early February, she led her project team on a new assignment. At that time, I was working on a different project in another city. I heard that her project involved dealing with a very difficult British client. After a long day with no time to eat, I called her to ask about how it was going. She didn't answer, probably busy, so I sent a text. She never replied. Later, I saw a group photo she posted on social media. Diego was standing right beside her, smiling brightly and flashing a peace sign. It looked like the project was going well. Her caption read, "Know yourself, know your enemy." Diego posted a similar picture, captioned "Victory in every battle." I checked their profiles and saw they had even changed their status messages to these phrases, as if sharing a secret code, something only they understood within the project. Since she hadn't returned my call or message, I commented on Diego's post, "Eat quickly, take care of your stomach." I rubbed my stomach, which was slightly aching and growling, and turned off my phone. That was the second time I chose to ignore her behavior. I was discharged 3 days later after the doctor confirmed I was fine. That day, I didn't get a single message from Gabriela. But she did send a bouquet of flowers cappuccino-colored. Flowers. Holding them, I decided to give her one more chance. Sitting in the hospital corridor, I called her. It took a long time for her to answer. Gently, I asked, "Gabriela, I'm being discharged today. Do you have time to pick me up?" We avoided mentioning amnesia or ordinary friends, as if those words had never been spoken. She didn't respond immediately. After a moment, she said, "Sorry, Daniel. I'm really busy and can't get away. Should I call a car for you?" "What are you busy with?" I asked calmly. She paused, probably surprised. I was usually considerate, rarely pushing her for answers, so I found it strange that she was so evasive now. I knew our first project had just wrapped up, and this should have been a quiet time for both of us, yet she insisted she was busy. She didn't reply. I sighed and hung up. A woman's love or lack of it is often painfully obvious. I remember when we just graduated and started working. One night, I suddenly got severe gastroenteritis at 3 a.m. before losing consciousness. I managed to call her. When I woke up, she was sitting by my bed, her eyes red. I couldn't help but smile weakly. She looked at me, still shaken, tears welling up again. "You're still smiling? When I saw you collapse at the door, I nearly had a heart attack." She sighed. "In times like this, you should call 911 first." "What if I hadn't answered? It's so dangerous." I smiled at her, feeling both dependent and trusting. But deep down, I feel safest with you. There was a time when she genuinely cared about me, when we loved each other deeply and sincerely. Even now, when those days seem almost unrecognizable, recalling those distant memories still brings a faint, self-mocking smile to my lips. I shook my head and threw the cappuccino-colored bouquet into the nearby trash can. "I don't like the flowers?" someone asked from behind. I turned around and saw a man I didn't recognize, pointing at the flowers in the trash and apologizing. "Sorry, the driver accidentally hit you yesterday. I brought you to the hospital, and after contacting your emergency contact, I had to leave because of other commitments. These are a discharge gift, and I've already paid your hospital bills. Sorry for the inconvenience. If you need anything else, just let me know." I chuckled to myself, realizing even the flowers were from a stranger. I looked up and politely apologized. "Sorry, I thought they were from someone else." Inside, I sighed. I've always been reasonable and well-mannered, but being polite doesn't mean I'm weak or easy to manipulate. It was clear Gabriela and I were truly finished. When I got home from the hospital, Gabriela was already there. I opened the door and walked in. She was sitting on the sofa, watching a variety show she didn't seem interested in, holding her phone and smiling faintly. As she chatted with someone, the soft glow from the screen lit up her face. I paused at the door, and she was so focused on her phone that she didn't hear me. I softly called her name, Gabriela. She quickly wiped the smile from her face and looked up, startled. My eyes caught her hands. She instinctively locked her phone screen and placed it face down on the sofa, looking at me with a mix of surprise and confusion. "You're discharged." I finally allowed myself to smile at her and at myself. I looked at her calmly, speaking softly, but with a detached tone. "Let's talk." Our breakup was surprisingly peaceful. We're both very composed people, so the whole process didn't take long. We're mature adults who care about appearances and everything was laid out clearly. There wasn't much to discuss, we both understood without needing to say it. After I said, "Let's break up," she didn't ask why. She just stayed silent. I think she felt a bit of relief at that moment. After a while, she finally said, "I'm sorry I didn't accept her apology." I calmly made arrangements for what would happen after the breakup. My tone was steady, and I didn't seem sad. My demeanor surprised Gabriela. When I suggested she move out soon, she suddenly interrupted me, asking, "Daniel, you don't seem sad at all." She furrowed her brows slightly, studying my face with focused curiosity, as if she couldn't understand why I was so composed. Women can be such ironic creatures, even if they no longer love you, even if the breakup is what they've wanted all along. They still get annoyed seeing you so calm and collected. Maybe in her mind, I should be crying or begging her to stay so she could feel a little satisfaction amid her frustration. I looked at her with a neutral expression. I didn't tell her I had already gone through my sadness when she ignored my messages, but commented on Diego's latest post. When she deleted the playlist she made just for me, filled with Korean pop songs she listened to with Diego. When she insisted we were just friends, while I pretended to have amnesia, or when she was caught in that ambiguous push-and-pull game with Diego, thinking I didn't notice. I had already mourned. To me, Gabriela was like a benign tumor inside. My body, not deadly, but I knew if I left it, it would slowly turn malignant, gradually destroying my health and vitality. There was nothing to fear, just cut it out while it was still benign. The pain would be temporary, and eventually, I'd heal. Before she finished packing and left, I calmly asked one last question. "Gabriela, did you lose interest in me because Diego is Pablo's son, or just because he's just himself?" At the door, then turned back to look at me with the same grace and beauty. When I first met her in college, she had a pretty face that carried a youthful innocence. Over time, that innocence faded into a calm, composed elegance. I used to think she was still that girl who blushed and awkwardly confessed her feelings to me on the playground. But in that moment, I suddenly realized she had grown into an adult, who carefully weighed her options, driven by her ambitions. She hesitated before finally saying, "Daniel, people always want to reach higher." Her words made me chuckle softly, but I respected her for being at least 70% honest. Looked at her and smiled sincerely. "Gabriela, I wish you success. In climbing to the top, may you achieve everything you desire." Her eyes stayed on my face, a faint hint of regret flickering in them. But that regret was probably insignificant compared to her ambition. Finally, she sighed and said, "Daniel, don't hate me." I didn't respond. The downside of office romance is that even after breaking up, you can't just forget about each other. No matter what, you still have to see each other at work. When the taxi stopped downstairs at the company, I saw Gabriela with Diego. They weren't alone. There were other team members with them. It was lunchtime, and they seemed to be heading out to eat together. Diego looked lively, his face full of a bright smile. He was facing Gabriela, with his back to the street, gesturing animatedly as he talked. Gabriela had a gentle smile on her lips, her eyes soft as she watched him. She kept an eye on the crowd in the street behind him, gently tugging his arm to steer him away from bumping into people. It was both familiar and unfamiliar. After our breakup, she looked so happy, stayed in the car, watching until their figures disappeared into the Hong Kong-style tea house downstairs before I looked away. The driver in front of me looked curious and asked, "Are you secretly in love with that pretty girl?" I smiled and explained, "She's my ex-girlfriend." The driver's expression shifted from curiosity to awkwardness, as if he wanted to comfort me but didn't know how. I kindly added, "It's fine. It doesn't bother me." When I entered the company, Bella was delighted to see me and hurried over, saying, "Daniel, you're out of the hospital. Honestly, you should have let us visit you." I smiled as I walked, replying, "It was nothing serious. Besides, I'm fine. Now, aren't I? How's the review of the Hong Kong case coming along?" She followed me back to my office, handing me a stack of documents. She glanced around, seeing not many people, and leaned in closer to whisper, "Daniel, don't look at the data yet. There's something I want to tell you." I put down the papers and looked up at her. A hint of frustration crossed her face as she said, "Daniel, you know Albert is going to take over the Nanjing branch next month, right? We've all been talking about it. It looks like the director position left vacant will probably go to either you or Gabriela." She hesitated, biting her lower lip, struggling to continue. I smiled gently and said, "It's okay. It's just the two of us. Go ahead." She finally whispered, "But a few days ago, I saw Gabriela hugging Diego in the break room." The fact that Diego might be Pablo's son wasn't exactly a secret in the company, which is why Bella looked upset. She probably thought Gabriela would have an unfair advantage. As I rolled the edge of the document in my hand, I suddenly felt like laughing. While I was in the hospital, wondering what Gabriela was up to without hearing from her, for she was having an affair with a wealthy second-generation heir. But honestly, that didn't surprise me. I laughed to myself and reassured Bella, "It's okay. Hiring decisions are made by the higher-ups. We just need to focus on our work and let things unfold naturally." Bella sighed softly, and I lowered my head to continue. Reviewing the data, when Gabriela knocked on my office door, I was quite surprised. In my mind, even though our breakup was friendly and didn't end badly, that didn't mean we could just chat casually or pretend to be normal colleagues. Figured we'd both avoid any private conversations unless it was necessary until I understood why she was there. She stood in front of my desk, her gaze coolly fixed on me. After a moment she spoke, "Daniel, I thought you would resign." Her tone mixed persuasion and warning. "Daniel, we've been together for 7 years. I'm not trying to be ruthless, but when Albert moves to Nanjing next month, one of us will likely get promoted to director to fill his position. If I were you, I'd start planning ahead and think about other options." I looked at her, understanding her meaning. She was confident she'd get the promotion and was advising me to resign. Otherwise, once she became the director, and with her boss's son as her boyfriend, she'd probably push me out to avoid any gossip. Her warning was her kind way of suggesting I make other plans. I can accept a woman's fickleness and changing heart because emotions aren't something to be tested. But I didn't expect her to lose even the last shred of humanity. I looked at her like she was a stranger and said the first curse word that came to mind, "Gabriela, you're a piece of trash." She silently accepted it. A week after that conversation, I had my first direct encounter with Diego. After our breakup, Gabriela, who had previously refused to make our relationship public, citing office romances aren't a good idea now, flaunted her relationship with Diego. I saw their Love Day Say posts on social media. Many coworkers congratulated them. Only our mutual friends from college who knew Gabriela and I were shocked and messaged me on WeChat asking what had happened. I didn't reply to any of them. The day Diego appeared in front of me was just an ordinary afternoon. Most of the office staff were out for lunch or resting at their desks. I was alone in the break room, grinding coffee beans. As the rich aroma of coffee filled the air, Diego showed up behind me. I moved aside to let him pass, but he didn't walk by. Instead, he stood in front of me, his gaze lingering with a somewhat meaningful look, before suddenly saying, "I know you and Gabby used to be together." He called her Gabby so casually. He looked baby-faced and was shorter than me. I looked down at him calmly, raising an eyebrow in slight confusion. He looked up at me, his eyes slowly scanning my face, and when he didn't get the reaction he was after, a hint of disappointment appeared. After a pause, he continued, "I saw that playlist she made for you. You two weren't very good at hiding your relationship." I stayed silent, waiting patiently for him to finish. He went on, my father really likes Gabriela, you know. Gabriela's strong, independent, mature, and driven. My father says she reminds him of himself when he was young." He paused for a moment before continuing. "My father wants to mentor her. Gabriela's future is limitless, and, as it happens, I like her a lot too, and she likes me." Looked a little proud. "Now we're together, but Daniel, your presence is quite bothersome. I hope you'll be sensible enough to resign on your own." That's when I realized what he was after, first to show off, then to intimidate, and finally to gently persuade me to leave voluntarily. I held my cup, my expression calm, my tone steady, even with a slight smile. I looked down at him and said, "Mr. Lee, any changes in an employee's position need to go through the proper channels. I'm not sure if you're here to fire me or what." I paused and added, "If you're here to dismiss me, company policy clearly states that HR should be the one to talk to me and explain the reasons." His face turned pale, probably not expecting me to be so firm. Before I turned to leave, I continued, "Oh, and for any personnel changes involving managers or above, they need to be personally approved and reported by the chairman. In other words, the only person authorized to fire me is the chairman, Mr. Lee. You're just an intern in Gabriela's department. You're overstepping your bounds." I didn't bother waiting for his reaction and walked away with my cup. Not long after my encounter with Diego, the announcement came that Albert was being transferred to Nanjing. Before she left, the chairman organized a farewell dinner for her, attended by all the senior management. Everyone understood that, besides saying goodbye to Albert, big changes at the headquarters were imminent.
Oh, nice.
When the HR manager placed the invitation on my desk, only Bella looked pale. She was someone I had personally mentored. She leaned over her desk, trying to encourage me. "Good luck," she said softly, then added more seriously, "Daniel, no matter what happens, our team is behind you. If things don't work out here, we'll follow you wherever you go." I chuckled lightly, tapping her forehead with the invitation, and said gently, "What are you talking about? It's just a dinner. Have you forgotten my motto, build bridges when you meet water, pave roads when you face mountains? There's nothing to be afraid of. Besides, the one who will lose won't be me." On the day of the dinner, I was pretty composed. In a private room, leaders from marketing, management, HR, finance, and various business lines gathered. Chairman Pablo sat at the head of the table, with Diego to his left and Gabriela next to Diego. When everyone saw Diego sitting beside Pablo, they exchanged subtle glances. What had just been a rumor was now confirmed, seeing an intern sitting next to Pablo. But since Pablo didn't introduce him, everyone pretended not to notice and avoided asking questions. I sat properly next to Sister Bai from finance, eating, drinking, socializing when appropriate, and staying quiet when needed. Business talk wasn't on the agenda. The focus was on Albert. Besides reviewing her contributions and wishing her success in Nanjing, it was mostly a farewell. Near the end of the meal, as polite exchanges wrapped up, Pablo set down his chopsticks and addressed the group. In his early 50s, he looked vibrant and energetic, almost like he was in his 40s. His sharp eyes swept across everyone, then he took a napkin to wipe his mouth before speaking softly, besides saying goodbye to Albert. "There's one more thing I want to discuss." I put my chopsticks down and looked at him. From the corner of my eye, I saw Gabriela beside me, wearing a faint, elegant smile, appearing poised and intelligent, a perfect match for Diego, who sat smiling beside her. I averted my gaze, lowered my eyes, and slowly began wiping my hands. With the towel beside me, Pablo's voice was deep and gentle. "As everyone knows, I have only one son. When he graduated, I arranged for him to work here. My son is very strong-willed. He didn't want anyone in the company to know his identity, and he wanted to earn his way up from the bottom." Paused, a proud smile on his face. "Over the years, he's done well. I've heard many of you praise him, and I'm very pleased. Now that it's the right time, with Albert heading to Nanjing, I think it's time to introduce him to all of you." His gaze, filled with pride, slowly fell on me from across the table. He smiled warmly and extended his hand toward me, saying, "Daniel, come over to your father. It's time for everyone to meet you." I calmly set down the towel and returned his smile. As silence fell over the room, the only sound was Gabriela's water glass tipping over softly. I looked in her direction. Her expression was calm, composed. She smiled apologetically while wiping the table with a napkin, her movements steady and unflustered. Then she looked up at me, her face slightly pale, her emotions unreadable. I averted my gaze without even a glance to the side. I simply stood up, and under the shocked stares of everyone present, I walked toward the head of the table. I placed my hand on the back of Diego's chair and softly, politely said, "Mr. Lee, could you please move?" Heard someone in the room. gasp audibly. Once the dinner had served its purpose, it quickly wrapped up. I could only imagine the storm this evening's events would stir within the company. But what intrigued me more was Gabriela. She'd once told me, "Daniel, people always strive for higher ground." I wondered if she was now on her way there. I didn't look at her, didn't bother to give her any reaction. Dazed, Diego came over to say goodbye to my father before leaving. I heard her restrained voice say, "Chairman Lee, we're leaving now." I said nothing. My father's watchful gaze fell on Gabriela's face, then shifted to Diego beside her. After a moment, he smiled warmly and said, "All right, all right." Once everyone had left the room, his smile slowly faded, looked at me and asked, "What's going on with you and Gabriela?" Yes, I had mentioned Gabriela to him just after graduation, but I never told him that Gabriela and I were dating. With his experience, he probably figured it out on his own. I smiled, meeting his scrutinizing gaze, and coldly replied, "You saw it yourself, didn't you? She was stolen by Diego. His mother is good at meddling in other people's relationships, so naturally, her son takes after her." I paused, then emphasized each word. "Father." The last time I called Pablo Dad was when I was 7 years old. Back then, he'd just divorced my mom. At the gate of our villa, I clung to his sleeve, asking repeatedly, "Dad, Dad, why did Mom divorce you? Say something." But he didn't answer. I didn't understand as a child, but as I grew older, I learned about the complexities of adult relationships. My dad and Diego's mom were childhood sweethearts. Diego's mother despised my dad because he was poor and married someone else. Later, my dad married my mom. My mom supported him as they built everything from nothing. When they became successful, Diego's mother showed up with Diego after divorcing her husband at that time. Pablo was young and proud, holding a grudge against his childhood sweetheart for choosing wealth over love. The more he resented her, the harder it was for him to forget. My mom, meanwhile, never spoke much about their past. She always maintained my dad's dignity around me. She was graceful and noble, divorcing swiftly after being betrayed. But after the divorce, Pablo didn't marry Diego's mother either. He just kept her around, mocking her for her poor judgment back then. Diego's original surname was Wang, but he changed it to Lee when he was 8, probably to curry favor with Pablo. His mother, who had taken over our home, and Diego were smug. They didn't know I knew about them, but I found out when I was 8. I secretly returned to the villa without telling my mom and saw Pablo celebrating Diego's birthday. He was holding 10-year-old Diego in his arms, with Diego's mother standing beside him. All three of them were smiling like a real family. After that, I never called Pablo Dad again, and we rarely saw each other. Gabriela only knew that my parents were divorced and that I had taken my mother's surname, changing my name to Daniel Moo. Later, when I graduated, Pablo offered me a job at his company. His words were, "All these years I haven't had any other children, only you. Doesn't your mom understand? You're my biological son. It's a business my wife and I built. Who else would I give it to, if not you? That aunt of yours always wanted her son to come work here, but I've blocked that every time. Daniel, your father knows what he's doing." My mother was proud and noble. When she divorced Pablo, she only took what was rightfully hers, nothing more. I'm not like her. Why should I give up what's mine? The more it irritates others, the more it makes me happy. So, after graduation, I joined the company with Gabriela, starting from the very bottom of the core business department and working my way up. Pablo knew about Gabriela, paid attention to her, and praised her as young and promising, saying her future was limitless only because I had mentioned her to him before. My family relationships were complicated. I'd originally planned to explain everything to Gabriela when the time came for Pablo to make it public, but she surprised me instead. Pablo looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a tired, weary expression on his face. He sighed and said, "It's my fault. I've wronged you." I chuckled softly, just a man being a man. Then I suddenly remembered what Diego had said to me in the break room when he tried to intimidate me. He said Pablo thought Gabriela was a lot like him when he was young. I guess they are quite similar in their ruthlessness and their tendency to burn bridges after crossing them. Oh, and they both lack good judgment. I returned to the company 3 days later. By then, Everyone had mostly digested the shocking news. When I came back, their expressions remained unchanged, treating me as usual. No one crowded around asking questions. They just smiled a little more warmly than before. These were seasoned professionals who knew how to strike the right balance, which allowed me to breathe a sigh of relief and keep my demeanor steady. Only Bella was upset. She complained about how she'd worried for so long, only to find out I'd been playing dumb all along. I finally made it up to her with a seafood dinner as she picked at a lobster claw. She asked, "You're the real rich young master, so what's Diego?" I didn't hide anything and briefly explained the situation. She looked shocked. My God, I can't believe there are people so shameless in this world, pretending to be the boss's son to fool everyone. That's disgusting, Daniel, she said. While you were away, a lot of people gossiped with me. Can I tell them about this? She clearly couldn't stand Diego's arrogant attitude. If it were true, fine, but it turns out he's just a fraud. I don't know what he's so smug about. I peeled a piece of lobster meat and with a casual smile said, "It's not really a secret. If someone asks, go ahead and tell them." I didn't underestimate Bella's influence. By the end of the afternoon, the whole company knew the truth about Diego. When I went to the finance department to get the project budget approved, I saw Diego standing in front of Sister Bai's desk. She frowned, pointing at an expense reimbursement. Foreman asked, "Why are you charging the company for a bag you bought? This reimbursement won't be approved. I suggest you review the other items more carefully. I don't try to charge personal expenses to the company account." His expression darkened at her words. He grabbed the reimbursement form from the desk and, before leaving, shot me a nasty glare, as if I had told her to say that. I said nothing. Ever since Pablo revealed my identity, I'd been getting involved in all the departments to understand the company's overall development better. Of course, Gabriela didn't get promoted to director, and for now, Albert was still overseeing things from Nanjing remotely. When I moved up to a managerial position, my previous role became vacant. Bella still needed more experience and maturity, so we brought in a business manager from another large company to replace me. Once the personnel changes were confirmed, many colleagues sent me congratulatory messages via WeChat or text, but only 2 people didn't. Whether out of guilt or something else, Gabriela and Diego had been avoiding me since I returned. But honestly, there was no real need. My time and energy were limited, and with all the company matters I needed to handle, I didn't have the bandwidth to focus on them. Besides, bridges are bridges, roads are roads. We were never on the same path. But they probably didn't see it that way. Diego was the first to confront me again, in the empty break room, with the same coffee beans. But this time, his expression shifted from arrogance to anger. Standing behind me, he spat out, "Hypocrite." I ignored him, so he continued, "Your mother pretended not to care about anything when she walked away, saying she'd never have anything to do with the Lee family again. I thought you two didn't care about the Lie assets, but it turns out you're just hypocrites. You act all detached and above it all, but in reality, you're fighting to come back. If you really were so noble and didn't care, if you truly looked down on my dad's assets, you should have stayed far away. All talk, but in your hearts, you're hypocritical and disgusting." His words made me laugh, actually. I laughed. Out loud. I don't enjoy dealing with unintelligent people, especially Diego. Bella had once asked if I planned to deal with Diego. And honestly, I hadn't really thought about it. Because as long as he remained in the company, there would naturally be others to make his life difficult. The one who would suffer wouldn't be me. Aside from the little attention he got from Gabriela, I never considered him a rival. Simply wasn't worth it. I looked at him, my gaze gentle as if watching a clown perform. "Diego, stop saying such stupid things. Look at you, so agitated and upset. All I did was take back what's mine, and yet you're acting like I've taken a piece of your heart. If I were you, I'd go home and tell your mother to come up with new ways to win over the old man. It's really pathetic. After all these years of you and your mother trying so hard to please and flatter Pablo, all you've got is a meager monthly allowance, not even a house. But don't worry, now that I'm taking over the company, your and your mother's allowance won't be cut off." Consider it your well-earned reward for keeping the old man happy." His face turned from green to purple, then finally pale as he listened to me. Then, as if he had just thought of something, his mouth twisted into a smile, as if he'd found a weapon to use against me. "I can't out-talk you, Daniel, but I'm not left with nothing. The girl you loved for 7 years is still mine, isn't she? I didn't even lift my eyelids. Trash belongs in the trash can. She's yours, then she's yours. What's there to brag about?" I think Diego chose Gabriela perhaps because he liked her, but maybe also because, in his eyes, Gabriela was the youngest manager in the company's leadership, and Pablo favored her. He might have believed Gabriela's future went far beyond just being a department director. He needed to establish himself in the company, and Gabriela was his best ally. In a way, Diego and Gabriela are quite a match. They both put on faques, using each other to climb higher, only to end up with nothing, deeply disappointed. It's funny when you think about it. After I finished speaking, I was genuinely tired of the conversation. With a patient yet firm tone, I looked at him and said, "This is the last time I'll be this polite to you. Diego, I hope you have enough sense to keep a low profile in the company. Otherwise, I guarantee I won't always be this good-tempered." Eyes filled with tears at my words, but I wasn't Gabriela, and I didn't feel any pity for him. I stood there, smiling as I watched the tears well up in his eyes, thinking to myself how satisfying they were to see. Gabriela's resignation didn't surprise me. I couldn't see any reason for her to stay. All her resignation procedures followed the usual process. I didn't interfere until everything was completed. On her last day at the company, for some reason, she sent me a message asking if we could talk. I didn't know what there was to discuss between us. When Pablo revealed my identity that night, she'd also called me saying she was waiting for me outside my apartment. Coincidentally, Pablo had asked me to stay at the main house for a few days to go over the company's relationships with him. I didn't go back to my apartment, nor did I reply to her message. After that, she wisely didn't bother me again. Perhaps because this was her final farewell, even though I didn't respond. She still came to find me. I had always admired a certain calmness in her demeanor. Maybe it was a trait all successful. People shared the ability to pretend as if the betrayals between us never happened. She was so composed that I started doubting whether my memories were even accurate. Her expression was so indifferent, revealing little emotion, and she even smiled as if we were old friends catching up. Standing at the door, she asked, "Shall we talk?" I stayed silent as she walked in and handed me a cup of coffee. I took it, and we stood side by side in front of the large floor-to-ceiling windows. Night had fallen, and the city's skyscrapers shimmered with lights. Looking out through the clear glass, it almost felt like we were standing among stars in the Milky Way. I heard Gabriela sigh beside me. "Do you remember when we first started working here?" she asked. "That was nearly 5 years ago, 2 fresh graduates standing in a similar high-rise overlooking the city lights. Back then, she had joined the company with ambitious plans but was assigned the most insignificant tasks. Later, through her own abilities, she landed a $1 million deal. I still remember the look on her face, pale from drinking too much, but still excited as she looked at me. She said, "Daniel, let's build a home together in this city." Later, that big deal became her boss's achievement, and she only received a 500 yuan bonus. She used that 500 yuan to treat me to a hot pot meal. Sitting across from me, her face was obscured by steam, but I remember her voice clearly. It was the first and last time I saw a look of bewilderment on her face. She asked, "Daniel, how long will it take for us to make something of ourselves?" After that meal, I went to see Pablo. Since he divorced my mom, she hadn't seen him, let alone touched his money or resources. Even though he gave me an unlimited credit card, neither my mom nor I had ever used it. That was the first time I asked him for help for Gabriela. I still remember the surprise on Pablo's face. He was delighted that I was willing to ask for his help. But I also remember his meaningful words. "Daniel, if she can't handle such a small matter in the real world and needs my help, then she's not worthy of being a daughter-in-law of the Lee family." Despite that, he still paid attention to Gabriela, and praised her publicly a few times. When the higher-ups show favor, it's like a guiding light. Naturally, Gabriela's career flourished. Afterward, she was smart and capable on her own. I just hadn't realized that along this journey of handling things, we had gradually drifted apart. She aimed to rise to the top by winning the princess's favor. Maybe in her mind, that was what it meant to make something of herself. The voice came from the gap in time, filled with nostalgic sighs. How did we end up like this? I scoffed. Gabriela, don't try to play the nostalgia card with me. I understand your earlier actions seeking better opportunities, but now, don't make me lose all respect for you. She laughed, turning her head to focus on me. She didn't speak for a moment, but the smile on her lips gradually faded, and she looked at me with a serious expression. Can we not even be ordinary friends, Daniel? I betrayed you, and you hid things from me. Doesn't that make us even... Gabriela? I sighed, looking back at her with indifference. I don't know what you mean by even when you say even. She pressed, Are you basing it on the fact that I'm Pablo's daughter-in-law? Did you really never think about that? If I weren't Pablo's daughter, what would my situation be now? I watched you and the chairman's son carry on your affair, flaunting your love, while I, under your influence and pressure, had no choice but to resign. According to the non-compete agreement, I wouldn't even be able to work in the same industry. The years I spent gaining experience, all my hard work and struggles, would have been nothing more than stepping stones for you and Diego to walk on. When I was wandering the streets, lost and broken, I imagine you and Diego were enjoying the best life had to offer some high-rise downtown, right? Gabriela, now you're telling me we're even? Do you really think there's a way for us to be even? Finally, I looked at her pale, dazed face and smiled faintly distant and indifferent. I politely said, Gabriela, there's no even. You owe me, and you will owe me for the rest of your life. I'm not planning to be magnanimous and forgive you. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If we meet again, we'll just be strangers. After that, I didn't bother wasting any more words. I glanced at my watch and politely said, It's time for you to go. Gabriela's figure as she left was unsteady. Over the years, I had rarely seen her look so defeated. But this was the path she chose. Later, at an industry summit, I ran into Gabriela once or twice. By then, I had already taken over Pablo's position and was treated like a star wherever I went. She stood on the outskirts of the crowd, starting over at a new company, slowly climbing her way back up. She didn't even have the qualifications to speak to me. Later, during a meal with Pablo, he casually mentioned Diego's relationship, saying he had been swindled out of money and affection, calling him brainless. I don't know when Gabrielle and Diego broke up, but it's no surprise that two people who once came together out of interest eventually parted ways for the same reason. I held my teacup, gazing at the garden in full bloom. Spring had deepened into April. Another year had already passed. The past had long been left behind, and I had overcome numerous challenges.